There were so many other people out there putting her story out there, and we wanted to make sure we could use our voices and say it in our way.
To the world, Gabby Petito was the center of a haunting true crime case, but to her loved ones, she was just Gabby.
This was an opportunity for Gabby to be seen as a person and not just the headline or the girl behind the social media account.
The 22-year-old from Long Island seemed to be living out her version of the perfect life, traveling the country with her new fiancé, as documented on her YouTube channel.
Hello, hello, and good morning.
She was easy in terms of just going with the flow. She was as easygoing as it could be. It really was.
Kindness is contagious, and Gabby was contagious. That's who she was.
How their journey back in 2021 took such a dark turn, now coming into focus.
Gabby Petito never goes outside.
It's a case that captivated the internet.
Me and Brian just got up and got ready, made the bed in the tent.
An aspiring social media influencer suddenly vanishes, and soon after, her fiancé disappears too. Then, about a week after being reported missing,
human remains were discovered, consistent with the description of Gabby Petito.
They told you first.
They said, we found remains consistent of your daughter. I remember I was crying, and I said, you have to be sure. I have to be sure if I'm making this phone call. They showed me pictures, and I confirmed it was our daughter.
Her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, later admitting to the unspeakable crime. Today, Gabby's parents are piecing together the final weeks of her life. Gabby's mom, Nicole, and her husband, Jim, and Gabby's dad, Joe, and his wife, Tara, remembering Gabby's final moments.
And when they set out on that adventure, what did you say to her before she left? Do you remember?
Yeah, and I always say this because I was absolutely the luckiest one. I got to give her a hug goodbye, and it was the most amazing squeezy hug, and she was crying. And I said, why are you crying? And she was like, I don't know. And I just was like, maybe she's just so excited. I cherished that moment. That was the last time I had her in my arms.
The family bravely sharing the closest held memories of Gabby's life and the previously unknown details behind her horrific death in the new Netflix docuseries American Murder, Gabby Petito.
The happiest people on social media usually have the darkest skeletons in their closet.
Her parents now on a mission to raise awareness and change laws around domestic violence, releasing never-before-seen conversations between Gabby and Brian, including this text she sent him. Don't try to control me because it only makes me mad. I love you so much, but it's the way you speak to me that hurts me the most. They also found a letter Gabby wrote, giving them a glimpse into what was really going on in that relationship.
Brian, you know how much I love you. Just please stop crying and stop calling me names. You in pain is killing me.
But at the time, her family says they didn't know the two were having any problems.
Were there any red flags that this was coming? Anything that you didn't notice that you feel like?
Yes, there were, but we didn't notice them at the time. Just growing up, you know, there was the age-old, you don't beat your partner, you're not an abuser type of scenario. And that's just not the case when it comes to domestic violence. And knowing what we know now, we see that progression that happened. Alienation of friends and family. Isolation from jobs.
Brian's stretching, doing some morning yoga.
Gabby and Brian were part of the so-called van life trend of social influencers, driving across the country, documenting their road trip on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram.
We are right outside Capitol Reef right now in a free dispersed camp spot.
They left New York July 2nd, their social media accounts soon filling up with pictures and videos of their travels over the following weeks.
I looked at Brian and I said, you better take good care of her, keep her safe. And he was like, I will.
For a while, Gabby and Brian's trip seemed to be going well, but newly uncovered video featured in the documentary seemed to show tension growing between the couple.
We have this nice big open floor for you to keep your dirty feet.
Behind the scenes, Gabby and Brian would get into arguments.
Okay, no, turn it back. Turn on the remote.
At some point, did she seem like maybe the thing with her and Brian wasn't working out on this trip?
Well, there was the incident in Moab.
Yeah, that day was a pivotal moment in that relationship.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
On August 12, 2021, a random stranger calling 911 after seeing Gabby and Brian fighting. Police in Moab, Utah pulled the couple over near the entrance to Arches National Park.
What's going on? How come you're crying?
I'm sorry, we've just been fighting this morning. Some personal issues.
The officers talking to Brian and Gabby separately.
If you wanted to be with her again tomorrow,
Yeah, take the radio.
did you get hit in the face? Kind of looks like something like hitting you in the face. How far do you want to go with this?
It's interesting watching it, the whole of that video, because you hear that discussion between the officers.
Yeah. And what does he say at the end?
You know why the domestic assault code is there. It's there to protect people, especially the reason why they don't give us discretion on these things is because too many times women who are at risk want to go back to their abuser. They just wanted him to stop and they don't want to have to be separated. They don't want him charged. They don't want him to go to jail. And then they end up getting worse and worse treatment and then they end up getting killed.
He predicted the outcome.
Weeks later, Gabby goes silent. Her parents now revealing their private text at that time to Brian and his family.
I said, hey, have you heard from the kids? I'm concerned about them. I haven't heard from them in a while. That went through, no response. A couple hours later, I said, I hope I have the right number.
10 days go by. No calls, texts, or social media posts from Gabby. Her parents report her as a missing person.
Ever-expanding search for Gabby Petito. Tonight, her boyfriend is now a person of interest, but he's not talking. The new pleas for him to share what he knows.
Unbeknownst to Gabby's mother, authorities say Brian had driven Gabby's van back to Florida alone. That day they reported her missing. Police body camera shows law enforcement trying to speak with Brian's parents.
When was the last time that you saw Brian and Gabriel?
Well, Brian is here.
Brian is here?
Yeah, and that's all I'm going to say.
The search intensifying when a couple remembered they had seen a white van in the Teton National Forest in Wyoming. Police, who had been searching the entire area, were able to pinpoint within 1,000 feet where Gabby's remains were.
They came in and they said, we found remains consistent of your daughter. I remember I was crying and I said, you have to be sure, I have to be sure if I'm making this phone call. And they did. They showed me pictures and I confirmed it was our daughter.
I don't know how we did that.
That was the worst phone call of my life.
Gabby's death was ruled a homicide. Brian, now a person of interest. But when police showed up to his parents' house, they discover he isn't there. His parents saying he went on a hike and hasn't come home.
Gabby Petito's boyfriend has apparently disappeared himself.
Weeks into the search for Brian, a breakthrough.
Earlier today, investigators found what appears to be human remains, along with personal items, such as a backpack and notebook belonging to Brian Laundrie.
The FBI says Brian admitted to killing Gabby in this 8-page handwritten letter released by the Laundrie family attorney. But Brian claiming it was a mercy killing, that Gabby had fallen and was in pain, writing in part, I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted, but I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock. The coroner's office later confirmed Gabby's cause of death as blunt force injuries to the head and neck with manual strangulation.
At the point that you guys found out that Brian had killed himself, were you focused on that next arrest, or was that just a total surprise to you?
No, I don't feel sorry for what he did to himself. I really don't. That's a choice he made.
You
He took
didn't
our
want
daughter.
him to have a trial and have to sit in front of you guys?
I think a part of us feels like maybe it was a blessing.
We know that he murdered her. We don't know why. We don't need to know why.
He was a liar. Nothing he said in those stories were true. He was a coward to the day that he died. And his family has to know that he took the coward's way out and they raised a coward. I'd use other words, but it's TV and it's just not appropriate.
In the years since Gabby's murder, her family is now hoping her story can help other people too.
I get messages all the time from people saying, I didn't realize I was in a bad relationship or a potentially violent relationship until I saw her story. I saw it, I got help, and I safely got out. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here today.
They've started the Gabby Petito Foundation in her memory with the goal of supporting organizations that work to locate missing persons and assist victims of domestic violence, and helping to enact change with the passage of the Gabby Petito Act in Florida, which helped reshape how law enforcement handles domestic violence investigations in the state.
Gabby is there every step of the way with us. Every time we go on a conference, we come here. She sends us more of those signs. So I know she's guiding us. I know she's with us, and I can feel her presence.
Our thanks to Eva. For much more on the story, watch Gabby Petito. Her parents speak out on 2020 this Friday.